Got a lot to go through in this video, including what I would consider arguably the worst function in all of Bionicle, and that's even taking into consideration the weird arm on the Hordika sets, which, like, why is that a thing? But whatever. I am curious, though, before we get to it, because we're going to save that one until a little bit later in the video, what you would consider the worst function in all of Bionicle. Or, if you want to take it even further than that, Lego. Or pick your favorite theme from Lego and then tell me about a terrible function that was introduced in that theme. Let me know down in the comments below. I definitely have a few answers that I can think of. But let's go ahead and move on, because something else I mentioned in the previous video too had to do with this spine piece right here, and more notably that insert which I'm using to give it teeth, because I said, hey, I'm going to show you how to do this, and then I forgot. I forgot. It happened. So we'll talk about that. I've got a knockoff here as well as some other things too, and at the end of the video, a little bit of something else. If I remember it, I did set the pieces aside to remember. But if you enjoyed this content, be sure to subscribe. It helps out the channel tremendously. And without further ado, let's start off with the thing that I said I was going to show you in the last video, and then I forgot. This spine right here, which is from the Nectan set, or the Paraka Star set more officially. This piece is an interesting piece. I talked about it all last video, so go watch that to learn more about it and how I would personally change it. It's not because I hate the piece. I think it's still an interesting one to try and incorporate into builds, because it can be quite difficult, and that can also be fun. But specifically, it doesn't actually have teeth on its own. Well, none of the Paraka spine pieces do, but they all incorporate a tooth piece. However, this one never came with anything. Thankfully, though, Lego made this piece right here, which is a little blade piece. It's very hard to show this on camera because my camera's terrible with white. That'll affect me later. But specifically, this one is an interesting one. So this one in white came, for me at least, on the Thunderkeeper's Village, which I got a handful of years ago just because it looked like a really interesting set either way. But it also just happens to be like the right size and shape to fit inside of this mouth. You can do it from the top or below. I kind of like doing it from below. It's a little bit harder, but at the same time, you can kind of align it better, and it gives you the ability to sort of push the piece in there to get it set in just right. And then if it's a little bit off center, you can kind of just wiggle it from the top here. And this piece is flexible, the blue piece, so you can kind of wiggle that too. And it'll sort of self-center. The reason it does that is because on the inside of this mouth, there's a little bit of a sprue bar kind of thing from when it came out of the mold, and that bar actually needs to accommodate that piece. That piece, though, thankfully, has a little cutaway on the handle itself that's roughly the same shape, so it actually kind of aligns itself, which is really cool, and it means you get an aesthetic like this. It's very sleek, it's very modern, it feels like the two pieces are meant to go together, and there's even a little tiny bit of detail on there as well. Obviously not enough to like truly mimic teeth, but better than it just being a flush blade in there, and I think that that's at least appreciable. It's not the only piece that fits in there. People have used like the 12-tooth thin bevel gears. They don't quite fit in there the way I wanted, but I used to use those in the past. There's the bull horns or samurai horns piece from way back when. Maybe Lego still makes it, I have no idea. And that piece can also kind of fit in there too. That's another one that I'd found, and it still looks okay, but it's got a less texture on it, and because it tends to be an older piece, it tends to yellow more. I guess you give the Paraka yellow teeth if you want to, but you know, it kind of looks weird because the shape of it gives it like a little mustache sad smile thing. It's not a bad look, it changes the expression, but it's minor. It's a very subtle change between those two pieces, and this piece just, I think, works better ultimately. But let's go ahead now and move on, because I mentioned that there's a knockoff that I want to showcase in the set, and I'm going to try not to spend too much time on it because it's not a review of the knockoff itself, but it is one that's pretty accessible because it actually came from the Dollar Tree. And it's cute. Obviously, it's sort of a botanicals knockoff, and I respect that. I'm a big fan of plants, obviously. There's literally a channel on my Discord dedicated to like plants and fruit and stuff like that, right? And specifically here, I think this looks like a terrible rose, mind you. That flower looks terrible for a rose, but it does look really cool for like a head. And this is sort of like a subgenre that people have come up with in the Lego community specifically, where they build like plant humanoid monster things. And I think this would actually look really killer, pun intended, I guess, on one of those mocks. And specifically because these visor pieces, those are the Brain Attack visors, but in red. It's not a perfect match for Lego's red. In fact, it's a match, or closer at least, to a different shade of red that Lego used. We'll talk about it in a moment here. It's not an official color, so it's not rust. But at least those pieces are quite interesting. Even more interesting, this isn't even the first knockoff brand I've seen use this piece in red, which is wild to me. And even more interesting than that, it doesn't even use the bar clip on those pieces, although it is present here. It instead uses the axle hole to then connect to a bar to connect to. It's a weird thing, but thankfully, LEGO makes those visors in trans light blue, or at least they did. They also make the claws right next to it in trans light blue as well. The flower here in dark blue, not transparent, but still cool in dark blue, and obviously that goes well with trans light blue anyway. Or magenta, that would look really good too. And then the dish piece directly on top of that also exists in trans light blue. The only thing I'm not sure about is that flower there. I know LEGO makes it, or at least made it in the past, but I have no idea what colors it comes in. I know I have it in like Kate Orange. It probably exists in red and a few other colors too. I don't know if it exists in any transparent colors. I wouldn't be surprised to say it doesn't because it's a flower, but at the same time, because of the shape of it, I wouldn't be surprised to say it does either. But yeah, that is the piece itself. It is a different mold from the LEGO one, mind you, but it's a similar size and it should still work with that build in there in general. And I know it's a little bit hard to see because red on this camera is not the best thing in the world, but it's better than nothing, right? So, do I think the set in and of itself is worth it for $1? Yeah, or $1.25, I guess. Yeah. Anything just about that's Lego related, Lego adjacent is definitely worth it. The pieces are Lego compatible. There are interesting pieces. Obviously that visor for one, but also like these Mixel sockets in green with just one stud instead of two. That's kind of cool. They easily could have used a two version, in fact. But yeah, nice to have those in here. The pieces attached to Lego used to make that piece, but never in green. So that's neat. And there's even some of these double-sided studs that aren't used in the set other than to just fill in those holes in that connector. So a bunch of cool stuff. The green here, again, not a perfect match for Lego's Mata green, but it's a lot closer at least. And the white actually is a good match for Legos, surprisingly. That's a color that a lot of brands struggle with, is Lego's white. So that's kind of neat at the very least. But yeah, so coming with a flower pot, 101 pieces. Granted, definitely some of that is fluff, not necessary, but whatever. It all works. And yeah, it's interesting at the very least. Moving on from there, though, as I mentioned, and I actually mentioned this in the previous video because I went on a little bit of a tirade about Lego's weird plastics from 2007, it is worth noting that this piece right here, this socket, is actually a different shade of red from this socket. You can kind of see it on the camera, which is surprising. But this shade right here, specifically from 2007, I don't think it's used outside 2007 at all, but correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. All of the sockets in red, I believe, are this color from 2007, but there are a couple other Technic pieces that are this color as well. Max Zelos is an example of this. Lisovic has some red parts in it that are this color as well, and it's sort of like a more scarlet red. It's a little more saturated than standard red. It's a very interesting color. Thankfully, not fragile, so you could use these sockets on your own builds, and I have. I think, correct me if I'm wrong on this too, this is also something that's seen in the Hakan set from 2006, but as far as I know, it's not all versions of that set that are affected, but I'm not positive. So let me know down in the comments if that is the case. Now let's go ahead and move on now to the useless function. So I said, it is not the Hordika arm, and yet I'm holding up a Hordika in this video because that arm, right? No. Interestingly, Wanua is a weird set because he actually has two functions, kind of. Yes, he has the arm, but he also has this weapon here, and this weapon baffles me. I don't know what Lego was thinking. I respect it at the very least, but why can it do this? Like, is that necessary? What is that doing? I get what it's trying to do. I get what it's trying to invoke. It's a sort of like jackhammer type weapon. It is very bizarre. And it is worth noting that all the Hordika weapons, the silver portion, or at least the tip portion of each weapon, is a flexible material. So like, I understand what they're going for there, but like, why, if you're going to do this for one weapon, why not do something like it for others? If you've got this flexible sort of material on part of the weapon, why not take advantage of that for some of the other weapons? You could have a mechanism that acts like a spring that does certain things or whatever, right? And this is neat. It is kind of interesting. I do think that the overall weapon outside of that looks kind of crappy, honestly, but I'm not the world's biggest fan of most of the Hordika weapons. I think some of them look interesting at the very least, but not my favorite. However, this one just always got to me because it's like, why? Why did Lego go out of their way to do something like that? I think another interesting one too is the Oniwa weapon, because it carries over this sort of like faux chain link aesthetic here, but now because it's that flexible material, it kind of moves on its own separate from the handle, which is kind of cool. It does make this piece a little bit annoying to store, because if that gets bent in storage, then you pull it out and it's kind of like this, and it's like, well, hell, all right, whatever. But it is cool. I will say probably my favorite of the Hordika weapon, either the blue weapon, because that one looks really cool, or the white weapon. And specifically in this video, I wanted to showcase that white weapon. I don't want to call this a hidden connection, because it's not. I've modified this piece, and the reason I modified it is because I got this weapon, the whole thing, out of a Lego lot that I bought from somebody a handful of years ago. At the time, I didn't know that the lot was primarily damaged parts, because they hid that fact from me and then they rushed me out the door. Whatever, it was like $10, whatever. But at the very least, this was interesting. So the piece that's supposed to connect to it, which I've also cut down, the tip of it was all chewed up. I don't know if it's from kid or dog or whatever. They had fun with it. I didn't, whatever. But there was only one of these in the lot, so I knew I'm going to get more of these in the future, because there's not much I can do with one, and it's all chewed up. But that's still interesting, because this right here feels like a weapon on its own. It's very hard to see against my white hands. But to me, it feels like a cleaver type weapon, and I really like it for that reason. It's interesting looking. It's very small as a weapon. It's definitely not something I don't think a Toa would necessarily have used on their character, but for a Matoran, this feels like a usable axe-like or maul-like or cleaver-like weapon. And in that scenario, this is a really neat one. I like it quite a lot. And it almost makes me think that what if we lived in a slightly different version of our reality, where instead of the Hordika having two different colors in their weapons, actually had two parts in their weapons. And I've talked about this before, not for the Hordika, but for the Paraka. We started this video talking about Paraka. I guess we're ending it talking about Paraka too. The Paraka weapons in their design are kind of an amalgam of multiple different weapons from the past, sort of kit bashed together. And to me, this is sort of a lovely idea, obviously, because it plays into the fact that a lot of like Lego designers for Bionicle were kit bashing things by this point in Lego's run to come up with new ideas, and I like that. But also, it makes me think, how cool would the Paraka have been if they had been made with modular weapons? Weapons that are made of multiple pieces that can sort of be mix and matched. Now, this is difficult for a couple of reasons, because the Paraka all have different color weapons. Not all, but there's 3 different colors, right? There's gunmetal, there's pearl, gold, and there's silver. So to make mix and match parts, you'd likely want them to be the same color so that they're easy to swap between other weapons, although I don't think it's strictly necessary. But even without that, I think it's a really interesting idea if you've got like the drill saw weapon from the Black Paraka, and the saw piece could come out, and then the drill could come out. Now you've got the shaft piece that could then be connected to like the little pinchers from the weapon from the green Paraka, right? Or the blades that come off there, etc. And I came up with this idea in the past. It'll probably be something I talk about in a future video, but I really love the concept of that at the very least. And it's not really something that we got from Lego. The closest thing you can even consider with the Paraka is the fact that 2 of the Paraka weapons have parts you can add to them, right? Hakan's weapon has a little laser piece that you can add to it, a lightsaber piece, and Thok's weapon has the tube piece that can go in there. It's a really cool idea and use of those parts. But yeah, it could have been a lot cooler if we went even further than that. Before we end the video, like I said, the other half of this weapon I also modified. I cut the chewed up portion off of it, specifically so that it could do this and then be used with other parts to connect it to like Mata feet and other things. Because man, that actually looks really cool. And it always bothered me that we got like Pohatu's kicker weapons and then basically nothing else as foot-based weapons. I guess the closest you can say is like Nuju Hordika's weapons could be attached to feet, and he could kick with those. That would hurt. Yeah, you're right, definitely. All right, anyway, before we end the video, as I mentioned, because I don't want to forget it, something I might try and do. Matanui. Matanui is, of course, the great spirit from Bionicle, right? Or one of. And he is portrayed in the story in part in his great spirit robot form in a couple different areas, right? But generally speaking, 2009, you get 2 different robot builds. And I always wanted to try my own hand at building a Matanui mock. Part of the reason I hadn't done that is because I just don't really have enough of the pieces in colors that I would want to use to do that. A lot of people do like dark gray, and they build sort of the comic accurate version, which is wonderful, I think, by the way. But it's not what I want to do. Instead, I want to sort of go my own direction with it, not really reference any of the source material. You know, allusions to it, sure, whatever, that's fine. But also, I think I want to change the color scheme a little bit. As mentioned, the Great Spirit Robot in the story is some shade of silver or gray. A lot of people interpret that as like dark gray, which I think makes sense. I kind of wanted to go in the direction of light gray. And part of the reason for this is because I wanted to consider what metallic color I would pair with it, right? Most people tend to avoid metallic colors with their Great Spirit Robot, or if they lean into it, usually lean into silvers and go really heavy with it. Both of those are great options. Obviously, again, I'm not knocking those. This is all about my interpretation, right? So how I want to do it. I wanted to think about doing the original special metallic color from Bionicle, dark flat gold, right? Because that color when it came out was sort of like the, I don't even know what to call it, right? Nothing else existed in Bionicle before that was that color. Gunmetal really either, to a lesser extent. Obviously the Balrog had gunmetal on them a little bit, but you know, Makuta had the gunmetal and Takanuva had the gold, sort of making these parallel colors, right? And so I thought that, you know, what color would go well with dark flat gold? And obviously I do think that old dark gray can go well with this color. Again, nothing wrong with using these two colors together, and maybe I'll even lean into that. I don't know. I haven't settled on using light gray yet, but I really like that idea because of the contrast, right? Obviously, this color looks really good on Takanuva because the white is such a bright color. This is such a dark color, right? So the colors play off of each other really well. But at the same time, I don't want to make my Matanui giant, right, white, because to me that's not the right color for it. But light gray, to me, that's another one of those classic colors. It's sort of the go-to neutral color outside of black for the Toamata, right? Their heads are light gray, the gears are light gray, some of the connector pieces, depending on which character you're looking at, light gray, etc. And so I was like, man, this feels appropriate to me. So I think that's what I'm going to lean into, these special colors, these colors with a colorful, if you will, history when it comes to Bionicle. Old light gray and flat dark gold. I'll try, but this will be difficult for a number of reasons. I'll have to get parts for it. And I think the only way that that makes sense for me. So I mentioned this in a video a couple weeks back. I am working on a Lego project specifically for the Bricklink designer program. And that project is basically finished. I might swap some minifigures around to sort of even the playing field, if you will. But ignoring that for a moment, that is something that I'll be submitting to the Bricklink Designer Program in September. Now, if you don't know what the Bricklink Designer Program is, I would advise you to look into it. I think it's a really cool idea, and I'd hope that more people get into actually trying their hand at something like that as well. But this is shooting for the moon, because I want to submit my model. And I do think I have a good model for what it's worth. I don't know what other people are going to be submitting. There are wonderful creators that have been creating for the Bricklink Designer Program in the past. So to even say competition feels dirty, but the competition will be steep, and rightfully so, right? But my thought is that if my set gets chosen as one of the sets to be created by Lego, which I'll probably cry over, like, honestly. But if it gets chosen, then this is something I want to do. I will try and tackle my Great Spirit Robot Matanui, or my interpretation of Matanui in the story. I think that that'd be a really fun sort of reward, if you will. And obviously, because, you know, if you win, there are some finances that come with that stuff as well. So that's more the major reason I'll be able to actually afford to buy the parts that I want specifically for this project, because I want it to be a big project. But it's going to be a difficult one. I really think it will be, and I want to do it justice. Anyway, that's it for this video. If you do enjoy the video, as I mentioned already, be sure to subscribe. Let me know, now that I've given you my idea for the worst function in Bionicle, let me know yours, because I am curious about it. You could even agree with me, but I think that's a little less creative. So really pick something, even if it's not necessarily the worst function, maybe one that just makes you question, like, why is this a thing? Why did we land on this as the option? All right, I'll see y'all in the next one. Take care.